And it's on an answering machine.
Right.
So I got 60 seconds.
No. It's a 60-minute tape.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's listen for the beat here.
That's the tone.
Have you ever did this?
Please record your message.
No, haven't you, No, okay, it's the beat.
Yeah, there we go.
I could do a memo two-way.
There you go.
All right, here we go. This is how I did all my interviews.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a genius.
All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Get your brain fresh and everything.
Well, fresh as it's going to be.
Okay. When did you first become interested in Bruce Lee, and what was it about him that attracted you to further investigate his life?
I don't have to answer that shit. What happened to Bruce? Well, it was the first time I heard of Bruce Lee in any meaningful way was when Fighting Stars, the first issue of that hit the newsstands. And it came out in a really rural area of Canada where I was living at the time. I was 12 years old. No, I guess I was 13, being generous. And bought the magazine because I had an article on David Carradine and Kung Fu, which had just taken over the airwaves and that I was interested in. And I read the first page in it that indicated that Bruce Lee had passed away. And I just, that got me interested because, you know, I didn't know who he was or anything about him, so I read the article and was instantly transfixed by it. And then it was a promotion piece for Enter the Dragon, so I went and saw that, and then saw it again and again and again. Saw it about 500 times in the theater, and then went and saw all of his other films roughly the same amount of time, and even snuck in a handheld 8mm camera to several of the showings to film his techniques and study them and break them down frame by frame. So that was, to answer your question, that was the first time I'd heard of Bruce Lee.
Okay, second question. Your original intent was to research and explain Lee's methods of training, but you were soon thrust into many aspects of Lee's life, such as his philosophy and his art of Jeet Kune. Can you touch on these subjects and some of the interesting discoveries you've made from your research?
Well, yeah, I guess you're alluding to the article I did for Muscle and Fitness. That, I mean, ever since I first saw Bruce, I was fascinated with his physical conditioning methods because obviously he had a physique which is incredible. And when you're a young, impressionistic male, you always, most guys look to bodybuilders or football players or something for their role models. And to me, Bruce Lee filled the gap completely and totally because he was not only a well-built, muscular male, he was an intelligent man. He was certainly able to defend himself. And he had a philosophy that underlay all of that. And as a result, I bought a bicycle horn and I rode around the neighborhood and bothered Paul Bax. So and then I
got the neighbor kid over too. No horn.
I got into his philosophy through whatever books and reading material I could amass at the time and throughout the years, and read it extensively and majored in philosophy in university, and then in physical fitness when I was writing for Weider Health and Fitness, Muscle and Fitness magazine on Bruce Lee. I decided that I might finally have an entree to find out what it was Bruce did, because if you looked at all of the publications from O'Hara Publications and who were the main disseminators of Bruce Lee information over the years, they didn't say anything about how he trained, and if they did, it was very nebulous. They said, he used some weight training, or they put down some concepts and nomenclature that the average individual wouldn't know what it meant, like a Roman chair and a cat stretch and things like that. Nobody knew what the hell that meant. So, fortunately, Linda Lee was gracious enough to think it was a good idea and to provide information. And when I spoke with her, shortly thereafter, when I did all these interviews and published that article on Muscle and Fitness, I realized I had so much material that couldn't fit into the parameters of an article that perhaps a book would be of interest, where people could really find out what he did. And that led to a trip to Boise, where Linda lives, and I stayed with her for a week, and she got me a photocopy machine to go through all of his daytime journals. And I came back with 80 pounds of photocopied material on the first trip, and came back with about 60 pounds worth the second time. And there was just reams of material that no one had ever seen before. And that, on the one hand, sorry to digress, but you mentioned sort of to touch on the philosophy and the self-defense. It occurred to me that his physique or his physical training and conditioning was part and parcel of his martial arts training. I mean, you can tell someone they hit a heavy bag, but unless you know how to do it properly, you're not going to get the full benefit.
Right.
And certainly Bruce's physique was the result of combined strength training and aerobic training and cardiovascular conditioning, which certainly martial arts training, when you practice kicking, repetitively, and as he did, punching 2,000 times a day and things like that, you're going to develop muscles. So, and conditioning and burn body fat and all the things that were the nature of the book. But nevertheless, you couldn't just isolate those two components and ignore his philosophy, because that was what motivated him and drove him to do all of that training. So it struck me that we needed, excuse me, sorry about it. The book, if it was to be accurate and to reflect the multi-dimensions of the man, would have to touch on all three components: his base training, or his foundational training, which would be strength training, speed training, agility training, cardiovascular training, nutrition, how you dealt with injuries, the workings of physiology and kinesiology, and all of those things. And then you'd need his martial arts training, his all the notes that he had on techniques and how to execute a proper lead punch and the best stance to do, and heavy bag drills and things like that. And then from that, you need a philosophy that underlay it, which would motivate you to continue training and would seek to inform you that the whole game is really about self-improvement and self-actualization, and not trying to be Bruce Lee or to ape him, but to use him, to use his analogy, as the finger pointing to the moon, and the moon in this particular instance being total physical conditioning, health, fitness, self-defense, and intellectual development, which his writing certainly would inspire one to obtain. So anyway, to answer your other question about what I found that was interesting was, everything. I've got 3 filing cabinets full of Bruce's papers and letters and notes, and what amazed me was that a man at 32 years of age could be so prolific. Especially one who had a full-time teaching schedule with private lessons. He made movies full-time, and television series, and also managed to be a father and a husband, and all of those sort of things. It's absolutely astounding that a man at 32 could have written easily 6,000 papers, on various aspects of the topics I just touched upon. But I was particularly impressed with his daytime diaries, which no one, for some reason, when they did the Tao, no one touched on these. No one put that into the training component. And when you look at the Tao, which is only 200 pages long, and you consider what I just said, that there's at least 6,000 pages of material, handwritten ones, obviously an enormous amount of material was not put into it. And that, to me, doesn't do justice to Bruce. It's giving you a segment of his totality, and what you need is everything that he wrote. And an interesting side note, apart from the daytime diaries, which showed sort of what he did and who his students actually were and who his private lesson people were, the daytime diaries, I was going to say, apart from the daytime diaries, what the hell was I talking about? I'm completely off track now. It was one thing I had, and I skipped the rails on it.
I never know what to say. If you say so much, you lose it.
There was something I wanted to pull up from that. What was it? It wasn't the daytime diaries. It was...
Day into Joe Lewis's relationship?
No, well, that's certainly the daytime. But, what the hell was it? Damn, you might want to stop the tape for a second until it comes back to me. Geez, what was it? It was daytime diaries training. Wasn't in the Tao. Daytime diaries.
That's the thing. I better leave it on.
Okay, well, I guess what the point I was trying to make was that there was lots of material. Oh, that was it. In the course of researching it, I spoke to Linda and said, I've been transcribing all of these notes, and, this is either going to be one volume, the size of, like no book on earth, or we may have to break it up in order to make it all Bruce's words. You could do a third-person synopsis of all of his works, and you could do one book, but then you always run the risk doing that it's going to be the author's interpretation of the material he sees. And Bruce's whole thing was take what is useful, absorb what is useful and disregard the rest. And in order for that to be effective, then you would have to be able to open a book with Bruce's own writings in it, see it, And then maybe you get something from it, maybe you don't. But maybe the next time you go to the book and you crack it open, you're going to get something meaningful from it. And then when you keep going back to it, you'll draw more information, which will add to the whole, gestalt of the thing. So I guess that's what I was trying to say before my mind hit the floor, was just that in the course of doing that, Linda said, well, what do you suggest? And I said, well, maybe we make it 2 volumes or 3 volumes. And she said, well, that sounds like a good idea. Make it 3 volumes. And I immediately thought of it as 3 stages of cultivation, so-called, which was a stage of ignorance where you don't know anything about martial arts, and you just kind of flail and react to whatever technique or situation you encounter, but it's an honest reaction. Then there's the stage of art, the second stage, where you have very mechanical, patternized methods of responding, which you learn through a martial arts school or instruction. And then the third is the stage of artlessness, where you return to that original state of innocence or ignorance, but when you react this time reflexively, you're reacting in a way that is very, very efficient, because you have had that prior training. And I thought, well, it'd be perfect. Each volume could correspond to one of those stages. You have the stage of innocence, which is the foundational, the training, the health and conditioning exercises and philosophy. Second stage, the stage of art, would be the actual teaching of the art, the teaching the lead punch, the on-guard position, the side kick, how to throw it, why the lead punch is always better than a karate punch, for example. Analyzing various martial arts styles. Bruce doing that, mind you, I just simply organized it. And then the third stage would be the stage of artlessness, or the highest stage, which would be the philosophy. So immediately it lent itself to 3 volumes, and interestingly enough, I was going through Bruce's papers, and at the end of one paper, seemingly unrelated from a string of techniques, was a statement which read, have 3 volumes, as though it was corresponding to the 3 stages, leading to the highest stage, which being that of mental cultivation or philosophy. So that struck me as very, very interesting. And I wrote Linda a letter and included that passage, and she sent me back a nice fax indicating that she thought, that maybe this book series had to be written at just this right time. I mean, it sounds mystic, so I won't go into it that much, but it just seems interesting that this is the way Bruce wanted the book presented, and that's the way we're going to do it. Was your hour up?
No. Okay. As you know, politics are rampant in JKD. Have they in any way affected your research, and what are your views on the concepts versus original JKD war currently going on in the JKD circuit?
Only Paul Bax who tried to draw me into this one. Well, yeah, it did. Originally, I had hoped to have a different one of Bruce's students write the foreword to each of the 3 volumes. And the thought being that really, maybe my perspective on having read Bruce's notes and having spoken to all the students is simply that they're cross purposes in many respects, and that is they're just different leaves on the same branch. Ted Wong teaches the original art. What Bruce taught him. He was a blank slate when Bruce got him, and so he had nothing to unlearn. Everything that Bruce taught him, he absorbed like a sponge. And if you want to know how Bruce trained, what Bruce thought or what he thought were valuable principles, that's what Ted teaches, because that's the only exposure he's had from Bruce. Danny, on the other hand, Danny Asano was originally Kempo Karate, and then he got in with Bruce and alternated between Ed Parker's school and Bruce's school. And he was a school teacher, so he was very interested in the conceptual underpinnings of Bruce's art as Bruce delved into it. So if you can liken the stages of cultivation, if you will, to an educational process, then the first stage of innocence would be like primary school, or grade school, I guess they call it in the United States, where you go and you get the foundational principles that will help you in your education. The second stage, the stage of art, is where you separate the wheat from the chaff. It's true to say you should take from all styles, or be open enough to learn from all styles, but not all styles are equally valid. I mean, there's some styles that if you practice them, you're going to get killed, and there's other styles that are very, very efficient. And what Bruce did, he was like the prospector. He panned through all these various styles and came down with these nuggets of reality reality and truth in terms of combat, which he took to be a shedding process. And after this process of panning, he took those nuggets and formed, although some may disagree, an art. And there was an art to JKD, although it was his personal form of evolution. And that's what he taught Ted, and that's what he taught Dan, and to a certain extent, that's what was taught at the Chinatown School. But then after that, I mean, once you've mastered that, you have to develop an open mind, or you should always have an open mind, but not wide open that you accept anything that comes into it. You have to be critical and learn what's valid and what's invalid. As I mentioned before, the blue punch in JKD will always be a karate punch from the hips. And that's just simply physics. That's not, the one style's better than another. It's just it's a shorter distance to travel, and that's that's Isaac Newton you're dealing with. So in Dan's case, it's true. You've got to look at other styles, and that is where the concept level has validity. You've got to be able to look beyond the mechanics of a punch and see the root that underpins it, and see why a certain technique is effective. And if you see that, then you can look at any other style and immediately discern whether a technique that they're demonstrating is effective or not, by virtue of the fact that the concepts that underpin it are valid. I mean, if someone has a technique and an art where you've got to spin around 3 times and hoop and let out a wall whoop 6 times before you deliver a punch, and then when you do punch, you've got to throw this wild looping right hook. It's kind of telegraphed. It's not going to be as efficient as a lead straight punch. And that's why someone who's familiar with the concepts can look at something that is completely impractical like that and call a spade on the front, say that would never work. But the concept behind the leap punch, this is valid, and if you can see a parallel to that in other styles, well and good. But like I say, there's 3 levels, and each different students of Bruce are ideal representatives of each level. And I don't, for one, view the concepts versus traditional as being at loggerheads with one another. It's more like the yin-yang. I mean, they're both components or segments of a greater totality, and you can't take one in isolation, because then you miss the philosophy or you miss the art, and there's both in Bruce's system.
Very well said. Is everybody happy with that answer?
Well, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I was going to have these guys each write a passage to it, but then I was hearing from Dan's students that they would be upset if Ted wrote it, because Dan really is the only one to teach it, and knowing Ted in that, I have a lot of respect for Ted, and I wasn't going to say that no, you can't write it, but Dan's going to write it. So I just thought back and thought, well, the whole concept of this particular book series is Bruce's own words. Not my words, not an author's interpretation, and not a student's words. These are Bruce's words, and therefore, if anybody says, Bruce liked Cali, or Bruce didn't like Cali, or Bruce didn't think much of Thai boxing, or he did like Thai boxing, or he liked grappling, or he didn't like grappling, well, let's find out. Let's go to the source of all of his amassed writings and see what he said about it.